We are nearly 1 week away from the California primary elections, and San Francisco voters will weigh in on a number of key ballot measures that could potentially help shape the future of this city. One of those measures is Proposition C. If approved, it would waive the transfer tax for properties that are converted from commercial to residential use for the first time. Not everyone, though, thinks this is a good idea. Our Max Darrow looks at the arguments from both sides.
Proponents say this will attract investment, help fill vacant spaces, and help build more housing. Opponents of Prop C call this a deceptive measure. They argue this will give tax breaks to those who don't need them, and they don't think it'll result in the kind of housing San Francisco needs.
Iced vanilla latte, perfect. Should we do
Jeff Wu
burrito?
owns Il Canto Cafe in downtown San Francisco.
Hi there, how you doing?
He's had to pivot a lot over the last several years to get enough of a customer base to stay afloat.
It's our way to connect with customers, yeah, even though we can't see them.
Since the office crowd largely disappeared and hasn't entirely come back.
Deliveries are busier. It doesn't make up for the foot traffic, though.
That's why he likes the sound of Prop C.
Right when the pandemic started, one of the first things I said was, why not convert these to residential apartments?
Right now in San Francisco, there's a 6% transfer tax on real estate transactions over $25 million. Proponents of Prop C believe waiving that tax for properties converted from commercial to residential use for the first time will help incentivize developers to convert vacant spaces into housing and therefore bring more people downtown.
So far, it sounds pretty good. I mean, we're just a small business here, so for us, it just seems like more foot traffic, and it should be pretty helpful.
On a walk down California Street with Robbie Silver, the executive director of the Downtown San Francisco Partnership, you can't miss the for lease signs in the windows.
Downtown San Francisco is hovering around 35% office vacancy, which is not good.
He says he will not endorse nor speak out against Prop C. However, he says downtown does need housing, and policymakers will need to get creative to make that happen.
We have great bones to be able to do that. A mixed-use downtown is a vibrant downtown, so what downtown needs as a whole is just an infusion of a residential and housing population.
But converting office space into housing isn't a simple task.
So you can't just come downtown and wave a magic wand at every old or historic building. It has to make sense at the end of the day. It has to pencil out at the end of the day to be able to convert an office building into residential.
That brings us to Justin Dolzel, managing member of Bar Part-Time and treasurer of the advocacy group Small Business Forward, not in favor of Prop C.
Prop C sounds good in theory. In reality, it's a giveaway to San Franciscans who do not need a giveaway. What they're going to build with that, I'm sure, is more luxury housing, which, again, I just don't think the city needs.
He and opponents of Prop C believe waiving the transfer tax will actually get in the way of building more affordable housing.
Transfer taxes fund extremely valuable social services. They provide money to affordable housing. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been generated by these transfer taxes, so we think they're very vital.
And he takes issue with another piece of the proposition.
But if this passes, transfer taxes will no longer be the purview of San Francisco voters. It would turn that responsibility over to a simple Board of Supervisors majority.
Back downtown,
I think we're going to need a little over 5 minutes.
Wu says he has a bit more thinking to do before casting his ballot, but so far, he likes what he hears.
I think the more people we bring in, the better. It should help out with rents, too. It should lower rents if there's more availability. A few minutes, okay? Thank you.
He wants to be a part of downtown's future, but a key ingredient there is consistency, and finding that will continue to take creativity.
Now, San Francisco Mayor London Breed supports Prop C, and she sat down with an interview with our Max Darrow to address the concerns of her opponents.
One of the things some opponents have of Prop C, they argue that this is giving a tax write-off to billionaires, and they don't think it's going to lead to the kind of housing that San Francisco needs in our housing affordability crisis. What's your response to them?
Well, my response is everything isn't about billionaires. And the fact is San Francisco does no longer have the luxury to tax. Our taxes are really expensive here. And in fact, they discourage some of our new businesses and new entrepreneurs from pursuing an opportunity like, putting together a group of investors to try and purchase a building, to convert a building to housing and mixed use. We as a city have to do things differently. We have to think about incentivizing rather than penalizing, because at the end of the day, the billionaires and the millionaires, they can choose to go do business anywhere. But here in San Francisco, we've never had to work this hard to attract and to retain business. And what that means is we have to make some adjustments.
Now, Mayor Breed also says this could be the next step in the ongoing effort to revitalize downtown. And the mayor isn't the only one backing Prop C. Coming up next, the Housing Action Coalition joins us live in studio to explain why they are supporting it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation on Proposition C here in San Francisco. Now, it would waive the transfer tax for properties that are converted from commercial to residential use for the first time. Joining me now is Corey Smith from the Housing Action Coalition. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Why is Prop C a good idea for San Francisco?
Well, it's pretty simple. We have a number of underutilized vacant offices downtown, and they're not being utilized for anything. And we know that we need more housing in the city. So we approached kind of policymakers and said, how do we convert these offices to housing? What do we need to do to make it happen? And unfortunately, the financial barriers are significant. The cost of construction, all the taxes and fees, et cetera, it just doesn't make any sense. So by waiving the transfer tax for these conversions, and only for these conversions, we know that we'll actually be able to take some of these offices and actually build new homes.
It's a big tax incentive, though, for these people who are billionaires buying these buildings. Some of that money could be used for other services here in the city that also need that money as well. So how is this a good thing if it's giving a tax break to people who really don't need it?
Well, keep in mind the transfer tax is only going to get paid if a property transfers. So if we maintain the status quo, the buildings will just stay empty. No taxes will get collected and nothing will actually happen here. So it's about revitalizing the downtown, trying to bring residents downtown and actually creating a little bit more of a 24/7 neighborhood in our downtown core.
It's a big gamble, though, because we're, with this tax break, because you're sort of counting on all these initiatives to hopefully inspire people to come back downtown, bring it back to life. What if those things don't work, and yet you're still giving these folks a tax break?
Well, we definitely need an all of the above approach when we're looking about downtown revitalization, right? We're certainly a believer that creating more housing downtown is a really good idea. We've done some assessments and some analysis on all the buildings, and we think there's probably anywhere from 15 to 30 total opportunities building-wise. So we're talking about 5,000 new units of housing, and that's one of the things we need to be doing to revitalize downtown. But we're also a big believer that building housing all around San Francisco, especially in the outlying neighborhoods, that's also a way that we can really reactivate downtown, because then we'd be putting residents closer to their jobs and actually creating manageable commutes where, if we're not building in San Francisco, oftentimes we build out in the valley instead, and you're looking at multi-hour commutes. So it's not one thing that's going to solve this problem. It's an all of the above approach.
What about affordable housing, though? A lot of your opponents say this is just going to create more luxury high-rise buildings for the rich and powerful. What about the folks that really need it?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's the same tired argument we've been hearing for decades from people that have opposed housing. They do things like vote against the 469 Stevenson Street, that Nordstrom's parking lot a few years ago that the Board of Supervisors rejected. And some people really just don't want San Francisco to build any more housing. Now, the Board of Supervisors will get to make rules requiring affordable housing, for example, in some of these conversions. But those who oppose housing 10 years ago, those who opposed housing 2 years ago, shocker, they still oppose housing today.
But isn't this taking the power away from the taxpayer, though, in that what sorts of housing goes up in their neighborhoods, especially downtown, if you're giving all the power to the Board of Supervisors?
Well, this is just sort of one piece. The Board of Supervisors still makes a variety of other rules related to what we build, right? The height, the density, the other fees and taxes that they pay, the affordable housing requirements. We get to make rules about some of the preferences for affordable housing. So it's simply removing one of the financial barriers, again, to move from the status quo, which is empty offices, to actually getting some housing. It's one of the things we need to be doing.
Have you heard from developers who are looking at this saying, hey, if this thing passes, I will buy that big building? Have you heard some feedback from people who are actually spending the money?
Oh, absolutely. We spent a lot of time with policymakers on the front end to make sure that this was actually a needle mover. And we're hearing from some office owners saying, if this passes, we actually think we would be able to move forward, potentially look at doing that sale to a residential builder, and then the residential builder can come in and add new homes.
All right. We'll see what happens. Corey Smith, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, coming up next, we'll hear from the other side on why they oppose Proposition C. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're going to continue our conversation on Prop C. Now, reminder, this measure would waive the transfer tax for properties in San Francisco that are converted from commercial to residential use for one time. Joining me now is Yolanda Parada from the group Small Business Forward. Thanks for joining us.
So happy to be here, Elizabeth. Thank you for having us.
So why is Prop C a bad idea, you think?
I mean, it really is just giving, it feels like a huge giveaway for us of the city. It doesn't feel like it's investing really in small business and affordable housing. Looking at this giveaway of the tax break is huge. And then embedded within this proposition is basically taking away the power of the voters. So San Francisco has made it very clear that they want this money spent on affordable housing, important social services. We raised hundreds of millions of dollars with these transfer taxes, and I think losing that power will be just it'll be a huge problem for what the downtown could look like in the future.
You know, you walk around downtown right now, and it's still pretty much a ghost town.
Yeah.
Businesses are leaving. You know, our studios are located in Financial District near downtown. Our local Walgreens is closing up.
Yeah.
Not because of crime, because they don't have people going to their store anymore.
Yeah.
So what's the answer? If not giving a tax break to these developers, what's the next step? What should they be doing instead?
I think part of it is really investing in small businesses, people who want to do business downtown, keeping the money and keeping businesses that already exist here in business. I know there's people currently losing their businesses to raising rents, to development, more office space being developed. It seems like at this point, also the idea of converting all of this into housing doesn't seem that realistic, especially if they're not thinking about the people that will be living and working out of that space. So we're not opposed to conversion. I think conversion is inevitable and important, and if there's buildings that it makes sense for, we should do that. But removing this tax and really taking that power away and putting it in the hands of a very small group of people feels really dangerous, and it's a threat to democracy, really. And there is a way to revitalize what we care about so much, like all of our coalition. We are very small businesses in our communities. We find that, like, for us, being able to create community also is creating safety. It brings people, it brings bodies. And I think that just growing this like big investment, more luxury housing that we have so much of already is really unnecessary. And it really feels like our city is being sold. And it's really being sold to whoever, you know, they're going around shopping city to city, it feels like. And what are we going to do? We're going to just give it away? Like, that just doesn't feel good.
Yeah, you brought up affordable housing, and I'm curious because, you know, the Board of Supervisors, if Prop C passes, they're going to decide who gets the tax breaks. Do you think that they don't care about affordable housing? Do you think that they're just going to follow the money, whoever the highest bidder is?
I mean, based on the past, I've lived in San Francisco since 1995. I love this town. We've had, you know, the last person up here was talking about the same argument, we're in the same place, and we haven't seen what's happening. It hasn't changed. Right? That didn't work. It hasn't worked before. Growing and growing and building, it doesn't bring rent down. So, I mean, personally, whatever can happen to lower rent is the right thing. Lower rent for commercial leases, for small businesses, lower rent for the people who will be working here. Give people incentive to stay put. You know, I think that will make a huge difference.
You know, the mayor told our Max Darrow that they're not really in a position to say no to people who may want to come here, and they want to give incentives to anybody who's willing to invest in a downtown that desperately needs bodies. They need people. What do you say to that?
It sounds desperate. That's exactly correct. I think, you know, in watching that clip, I was like, she does seem like this is the only option, and I feel like that's not very creative. I don't think it is the solution. There has to be another way, and that's not my profession knowing what that solution is exactly, but it does seem like there has to be a more creative way to sort of bring up and change what happened downtown. And we're dealing with it was very fast growth. It happened quickly. We weren't thinking about what was going to come in the future. We didn't know all of what we know now, and so we need to come up with a creative solution to fix it. But I don't think that this is the only one.
All right, Yolanda Parada.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. Well, thanks so much for joining us for a closer look at both sides of Prop C in San Francisco. We'll be taking a deeper dive into some other key ballot measures across the state over the next few days here at 3 o'clock. And of course, you can always find all of our political stories anytime on our website, kpix.com. I'll see you at 5.